You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
All right, hello and welcome to this week's episode of the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast. As always, this is Daniel Barrett here from AdWordsNerds.com. And look, if you are looking to get more leads online, to find more deals for your real estate investing business, you know where to go. It's AdWordsNerds.com. Jump on a free call with my team. We will help you put together an online marketing strategy for your market. All right. Folks, this week, I have got a burner of an interview for you. I'm talking to Jeb Altonaga. Now, if you don't know Jeb, he runs Clearglass Capital Partners. They help companies raise funding. And what is so fascinating about Jeb is, one, he's got this really incredible analytical mind, really deeply thought about risk and risk management. He's got this deep financial services background that's just really, really fascinating. But on top of that, he combines all that with this real kind of skill for telling stories and simplifying down complex ideas. Part of this comes from his personal background, which is incredibly varied. He's lived all over the world. He's been doing business in all sorts of different cultures. The guy is fascinating. I had such a fun time talking to him, and I know you are going to have a fun time listening. So without any further ado, let me get into my interview with Jeb Altonaga. All right, what's up? It's Daniel Barrett here, and I am here with Jeb Altonaga. Jeb, how are you? We were just talking about pronouncing your name, and I feel like I still screwed it up. I try my best. Welcome to the show, man. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks, Dan. That was actually better than any teacher I ever had in school. So, kudos to you for that. Still a little jet lagged after arriving from Sydney this past weekend.
Yeah.
But last night was my first full night of sleep without being up from midnight to 3 a.m, binge watching Netflix until I was tired again. So
oh my God.
We're
all
good.
Right. Well, you are definitely going to be the one. Remind me, I'm going to ask you about like jet lag strategies and stuff like that, because we were just talking about, you have this really cool sort of like background. You've been traveling the world, living in all sorts of different places, doing all kinds of different things. Today, You are the founder over at Clearglass Capital Partners. If you're listening to this, you want to go check out Jeb's stuff, you can check it out at clearglasscap.com. So let's start at Clearglass, and then we'll kind of work our way backwards. So for when, if you don't know somebody, you're trying to explain to them what you do, what the company is all about, what do you typically tell them?
Basically a strategic marketing and advisory shop that helps emerging and boutique fund managers or even business entrepreneurs that are looking to raise capital to be able to expand their business or increase their deal flow, and are kind of off the radar for majors. The big investment banks that kind of do this on an institutional basis for well pedigreed guys that are coming out of big shops like Citadel or Tiger Global or things like that. And just coming from a small shop, I found that it was hard to have a voice and get people to listen. And so I thought that was a good niche and focused on the, not necessarily the little guy, but, the ones that are need to punch above their weight and build some strategic relationships there and fight the good fight. And I think that's what it takes. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell.
Yeah. One of the things I really love about you, and one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on the show, is like, you are this really unique combination of really analytical thinking with also the importance of being authentic and telling a good story and these kind of like core marketing concepts. So let's kind of go back a little bit. Let's talk about your origin story. What got you into finance specifically? Because clearly there's a lot of different ways you could have gone. Why this particular industry?
Yeah, so very unconventional in a, way financial services is where I've been since I got out of college. And apologies if I say uni or drop some kind of traditional Queen's English references. You can Google it and it'll come up if you don't understand it. But yeah, I was in LA, not really focused, organized, loved skating, loved surfing, snowboarding. Wasn't thinking or focused on career, given the fact that, parents weren't really tertiary educated. They didn't have college degrees. So it wasn't a major focus in my household, right? There was more old school migrant family values, stuff like that was promoted. And so I had an uncle that had married my dad's sister, and he was an executive at one of the larger investment banks. And he was always just in my ear chatting with me about what I wanted to do and things like that. And so given his tenacity and perseverance in trying to make sure that I was focused, he must have seen something was there. That is how I fell into financial services and being a serial entrepreneur, to be honest. Even while I was working in various industries within the financial services mind frame, I was also doing entrepreneurial things like, living in an apartment with three other roommates, still dorm style, two people in a room, you're saving money. I was buying multifamily buildings across North Hollywood. And I had a total of three of them with some other partners that were in various real estate type industries like appraisers and mortgage brokers, right? And so that was one start. Another one was when I was doing bankruptcy, restructuring, banking work. We had come across wholesalers in the mobile communication space. And so they were reselling lines for like AT&T, T-Mobile, those Sprint, et cetera. And I started, since we were working as bankers and doing a bankruptcy restructuring for them, you kind of saw the ins and outs of the commission schedules and stuff like that. And so when two of my buddies had gotten laid off, I brought them the idea and we opened up a cell phone store in Torrance, California on Pacific Coast Highway. And it was when like Nokia was hot and everybody wanted to keep changing the face plates and, all of that kind of stuff. And so besides the accessories, we were also selling lines and earning a commission that way. And we were the first store within like a 5 or 10 mile radius. And then I think within 2 years, there was 15 stores around us. So you can tell how that story went. But, it just goes to where my thoughts have always been: financial services, educating myself about how to deliver value and extract value from investing, but then also being an entrepreneur and coming up with crazy ideas to try to be independent and build wealth for yourself and the family.
So, there's so much I want to talk about, just that process of doing so many different things, even early on. But let's go back a little bit and talk about, you mentioned kind of like the sort of immigrant family values that were sort of instilled in you rather than sort of the classical, hey, everybody in your family went to college and you're coming from generational wealth or whatever. So first of all, where did your family sort of originally immigrate from? And how do you think that informed your childhood or the values that you sort of bring into your professional life today?
Yeah, no. So to give some context there and, break out the violin. I don't need the soft. There was.
I have one over here. Hold on. I'll go get it. I'll bring it on.
My father is of British descent, first generation in the States. However, I didn't grow up around my father. He was genius level smart. I believe his IQ, speaking to his siblings, who I'm now very close with, was somewhere like 164, something like that, which I know is way up on the scale. Yeah. But never really focused. I have, for context, 4 sisters with 4 moms, one older, 2 younger. So that kind of gives you an idea of where my father was and was not in my life. My mom's side of the family, and this is where when you talk about context and that family value, they were of Spanish or Basque descent, to be specific, within Spain, but 2 generations in the Philippines. And so having a little bit of the Filipino heritage along with the Spanish culture, migrants to the US, as the typical migrant story goes, hardworking, want a better life for their kids, willing to work whatever hours, do whatever jobs, and really focus on building that career for their kids. So we had that. And then that was my mom's parents. My grandfather became a regional manager for a life insurance company. He did fairly well. My grandmother stayed at home with me while I was growing up, and then did factory work and things like that during that time when we actually had manufacturing here in the States and it was in vogue. And then my mom, again, just to kind of write on the sob story, was a serial addict. So she was in and out of she was always in my life, but I think her and I have a relationship that resembles more of a sibling relationship than a mother-son type. And, to this day, I mean, we're still very cool. We're still very close. But people are always surprised when I introduce her as my mom, because there must be that vibe that she's treated more like a sibling than you would a parent. And so that's how that family dynamic, I think, kind of came around, very, very close to my grandfather's and my grandmother's siblings as well. And the cousins and uncles and aunts that came off of that. And we were always at each other's houses. There was always, obviously, holiday parties for Easter, Christmas, New Year's, etc., as well as just random weekends. We seem to always be together. So there was a lot of family value there, as well as just guidance, right? Them making sure that they wanted you to be successful and take what they struggled to come from a third world country to the States and really champion that mantle for the pain that they did and the comfort they left from being back in their home country to come here and forge a new life for us. So that's kind of the background on that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. And it really strikes me too that extended family network is so important to so many people's stories. And it's something that I think in a lot of, people who have been in the States for a long time, it seems to become less important over time. Like there's just a smaller sort of extended family group. So I am super curious, right? You come from this really fascinating background, lots of mixed sort of cultural influences, but, like you said, some difficulty there, right? Interpersonal difficulty or instability, whatever you want to call it. So I'm curious why you think you ended up getting into these industries like financial services, real estate, even starting, opening up this cell phone store, right? These are, to me, right, as someone who's not in those industries, what I hear when I hear those things is you are willing to take on risk for the upside opportunity. But what strikes me is like you could spin your background story and come out of that saying, no, I have to be conservative. I've got to protect what I have. It would be easy to come out of that afraid to make those leaps, right? So I'm curious, what you think either in your background, your personality sort of drove you to be able to make those jumps, make those leaps when you saw those opportunities. Why do you think you were able to make those decisions?
Look, I don't think I've spent enough time on any shrink's couch to have a definite clear.
That's what this is. You can write this off on your insurance. It'll be fine. It counts.
But I think my thought, and I thought about this significantly, from time to time, when you go on holidays and you take time to actually, smell the air and take a little bit of a breather as you meditate on what you want to do next, etc. That is something that's crossed my mind many times. And I think it's fight or flight, right? It's either, you go 150 miles an hour or you go 10. I think it's part of those tales that people that come from backgrounds that would not be traditional end up, right? And I could have either been a school teacher and very conservative and never did anything that was on the risk curve, or like I went full on and just, I embrace everything that risk has. And I think it's just that mix of personality and the fact that I've always just been very ambitious. I've probably, had a head for not wanting to listen to authority. So the more somebody says you couldn't do this, I was like, well, the more so I'm going to push and show you that I can. And, one of the things that I think my wife has always mentioned to me and friends and other family members is there's nothing that they've ever seen me put my mind to that I couldn't accomplish. And even if it took longer than someone else or a lot of fighting, it was the perseverance and the grit that you're going to stick it out no matter what. I had a trainer in Hong Kong that was up from Brazil, and he used to tell my wife that he would train me as hard as he did just to see where my breaking point was. And he said, he will not break. I feel like he will just die of a heart attack before he'll stop, just to prove a point that you can't break him. So I think that's just the personality is I will not quit. Yeah. That led me to that, as well as just, exploring. I love to explore, and I see opportunities. I explore how we could take advantage and be part of that opportunity. And I think having great mentors, bosses across the financial services spectrum. My uncle, who was married to my dad's sister, wasn't even a blood relative, that first took me under my wing. And then my dad's youngest sibling, who I've grown into a really good relationship with. And he is also in the real estate business. He's a CEO of a home developer after being a partner at an accounting firm and a CFO of a major home builder. So, I had positive influences around me from time to time, and they've rotated, but also the strong family values. And I think just a very outgoing, curious personality. It was just the right, chemistry of mix of all of these variables that came together and spit out this, right? When it could have been completely different.
Yeah. I love I'd rather have a heart attack on the mat than I want to think that of myself. Well, I'm not sure what happens when I get there, but it kind of strikes me as something they always say in mixed martial arts, right? It's like, oh, that person, they've got a real dog in them, right? It's like that sense of like feeling willing to fight. So there's so many things I want to ask you about. And there's so many really fascinating things in your background, but you do have kind of experience in the hedge fund world, this financial services world. So I am always so curious about how people in your position think about risk. So let me ask this in a kind of different way. What do people like me, so people without formal financial training, right, without a lot of analytical background, what do people like me get wrong about risk? Either personal risk, professional risk, however you want to tackle that question. What are the mistakes people make in how they think about risk in general?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And we could go through many rabbit holes, but I feel two that really stand out. One is being, I guess, truthful about timeline with the risk you want to take and how long you're willing to put yourself out there on that risk spectrum. Mm-hmm. Is it a 6-month risk tolerance? Is it a 12-month? Is it a 10-year? And then really staying true to that. I think that's one of the major things that we get wrong, is not understanding the timeline that we have for a specific risk-taking activity that we want to put ourselves out there for. And the second is thinking that we can match the tolerance and the approach that professionals that have been doing what we're trying to take on for much longer than we have. So, if I think about if we go to hedge fund investments or just generally investing in the market, right? I have friends and we talk about this all the time. They think they're like, oh, we can buy this stock. I want to buy that stock. And I go, okay. Then they go, what do you do? And I go, I index. And they're like, what do you mean you index? But you're in the industry.
You're the guy. Yeah.
They're like, yeah, why aren't you buying this stock and that stock? And I go, because I see, when I sat in a hedge fund, I see guys looking at companies for 80 hours a week. That is their job. And they still get it wrong. You have a full-time job that you go to for 40, 50 hours a week, whatever. You have kids, you have a dog you got to walk, running on the weekends, whatever it is. I go, you are giving it 1 to 2, maybe 10 hours a week on your investment portfolio, and you think that you are going to beat them. I go, it just doesn't align. So I think realities of what your risk is. And, there's something about, I'm not saying you shouldn't, think about your own portfolio and play with it, but I think you got to swim in your lane. If you're someone who works in an industrial capacity, and let's say you work at GE and build jets, I don't know, then if you stuck to looking at industrials where you have a lot of experience in, that makes sense. But don't think you can buy financials and, you're going to look at technology companies and things like that. It's just not within your your degree of experience, let the professionals do it, right? And then if you mirror the honesty of self-awareness and you can align timeline to what your risk parameters are for how long you're thinking about some of these risky activities, whether it be investing or learning a new sport or being a mixed martial artist or whatever it is. I think having those two things probably is the right recipe for success. And we can't get it right. I mean, it's a constant ebb and flow, but I think those are the two main things that, in my experience in life on earth, now that I'm getting up there, have taught me. And I think it's finally setting in now that I'm getting into my late 40s that I wish I would have known and thought about when I was in my mid 20s, and taking those big risks and failing, right? And also, I think not caring about the failures and what everybody else is going to say. I think that's another big component as well. We're so worried. And I know probably more so, at least for myself, when I was much younger, what other people thought than what I thought internally, right? And I was trying to make sure other people had a more positive outlook of what I thought of myself than just thinking about it internally. And once I flipped that and I thought about just what's going to make myself happy and how am I going to define my success. And if I fail, as long as I get up, I'm satisfied. And did I learn something from it? When I took that mentality, I think the world just opened up and, the eyes were clear as opposed to being foggy, and the clarity that comes with having that mindset was much better.
Yeah. I mean, it strikes me as one of my favorite things about doing this podcast, right? So you get to talk to all these different people and you start to pattern match the things that they say that come up over and over again. One of those is being okay with failing. Like literally the last episode I did with Michael Jimenez, he talked all about failing and being able to just kind of come back and persevere. Like you said, like also a guy with wrestling background. So, it's like that kind of metaphor holds true.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed part 1 of this episode. It's just too good to limit to one show. Join us next week to hear the rest.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.